Hi, everyone, and welcome to Catalysts for Change, the show where we explore the stories, strategies, and turning points of leaders driving meaningful impact in their communities and across the country. I'm Adam Lister, and I'm so glad you're here. Today's guest is a visionary leader in Tennessee's education and philanthropic landscape, someone who's blended sharp business acumen with a deep sense of purpose to help reimagine what's possible for students across the state. Tara Scarlett is the president and CEO of the Scarlett Family Foundation, where she leads efforts to remove barriers to post-secondary access and success, strengthen early literacy, and bring people together across sectors to drive systemic change. Her story is one of transformation, personally and professionally, and what it means to lead with heart, data, and conviction. Let's dive in. Tara, thank you for being here today. It's good to see you.
Thanks for inviting me.
You have said before that becoming a big sister and getting to know your little sister, Destiny, was a life-changing moment for you. Can you take us back to the time that you made that decision and share how that experience shifted your path in life?
Absolutely. I was living in Atlanta, working for Coca-Cola, living the professional life. I was single at the time, and we had already started the foundation, but I was not very involved. And I wanted to have something more in my life. And I had an opportunity through Coca-Cola to become a big sister as part of the Big Brothers Big Sisters program. And it was a pretty quick process of becoming a big sister. When I first met Destiny, who's my little sister, we met on her birthday, May 1st. And it was such a fantastic moment. I met her and her mother at the same time. And within a few weeks, we were getting together about once a week. And I'll never forget the time that I went to go pick her up at her house for the first time. And just to give you some context, Destiny's one of 9 children. Her mother is 10 years my junior. And there's 3 fathers involved among the children. Her mom is a very strong human being. And she pulled me aside when Destiny had run inside to get something else out of the house and said, "Tara, I just want something better for my daughter. I just want something better for Destiny." And that really spoke to me. And I spent a continued time building relationships with Destiny, obviously, but also with her mom, too. As much as I learned from her, I think she probably learned from me. That relationship continued to grow over the years and really just transformed how I was able to look at the world around me, because it was a very different living experience than I had experienced growing up. As time went along, as I got to know Destiny more, we talked about, what do you want to do when you grow up? Like basic things. She's 13 at the time, and I was in my 30s, and I had never had children. And so just trying to figure out, what do I have a conversation with this young lady about? And she's such a determined young woman, and she still is a very determined human being. And she wanted to be either a math teacher or a pediatrician, which, as you can imagine, those are 2 people that she would have seen a lot in her young years. And I told her, I was like, you can do either one of those. It doesn't matter where you want to go in the world. You have that opportunity. And so she wanted to go to college in order to be able to go down that pathway. Her mother had dropped out of high school at the age of 16, so she'd never experienced graduating from high school because she started having babies before the end of that period of her life. And it was a process of me educating her mom on she needs to take an SAT or an ACT in order to get into college or to apply for college. And it was a whole process, and that learning experience, not only with Destiny's mom, but also with the school counselor. Destiny's mom gave me permission to go speak with the school counselor. And the high school was quite a large high school in South Atlanta. There were 3 counselors. Each one had a workload of 750 or 800 students, and that still didn't cover the entire school. And she just didn't know who Destiny was. And that was a really eye-opener to me, saying that, how do we have a young lady who's so determined and so excited about going on to life after high school, but doesn't have the support anywhere around her to help her get that leg up? And that's really was the beginning of the turning point for me to say, okay, I want to do something more in my career.
It's hard to imagine, even if she's seeing those professions and she has those dreams, and there are thousands of different destinies in places like Nashville and Atlanta and across the country. Even if you've got the dreams and the aspirations and the skill and all of those sorts of things, if a barrier is that you are an unknown number in a caseload of even well-intentioned counselors. That's a pretty significant barrier to overcome. You talked a little bit about her mother being a strong person and wanting better for her kids. As a dad, I can identify with that, and I'm sure you can. You became a mother at some point down the road. I won't ask you to say how many years, but how did those relationships and the depth of that perspective as a mother sharpen your view of what matters most to you, both in your work and in your life?
Becoming a mother was and still remains probably one of the most important things of my life. I mean, certainly being a big sister to Destiny and also being a mom to my 2 kids is really, as any parent can understand, a very special experience. My view of working with my children or nurturing my children, helping them grow and absorb, they're getting that day to day. They're getting that every single day with myself and my husband, with each other, with their teachers at school, where they go to a really good school, being able to provide to them in ways that I see a lot of other students, or a lot of kids don't get. That's a privilege that they have and that my husband and I have an opportunity to offer. I work every day to make a better life for them, but it's not just them. It's the broader community too. And that's where, my relationship with Destiny comes into play. I can never imagine what it would be like to grow up in her house. But being able to spend time with her and her mother and her siblings and being able to recognize there's a lot of families like that. That's where my passion has come into play to say, what more can I be doing to help not just my kids understand, to learn, to grow, to see the world around them, but also help other families be able to help see opportunities for themselves and gain access, open up doors, help them see mobility where they might not have seen it before.
You talk about being there every day for your kids. I've seen you describe leadership as showing up with care and consistency. Where did that belief really take root for you?
Probably my parents is what I would guess. My mother was always there consistently growing up. And that was just it was family, growing family, building families. My father as well. We spent a lot of tight times as a family of 4. I have a brother as well. And being able to work together and nurture each other, and just as we're trying to do with my family.
You have a trajectory in your career that may resemble many nonprofit leaders who have gone in and out of the public and the private sector, and then others who have never been in the private sector. So as folks that are listening to this are trying to think about the lessons that you had working for major corporations in marketing at places like Coca-Cola, what did you take from that still shapes how you lead today? And help us think through for the nonprofit leader or for the changemaker that's thinking about making a difference in their community that may not have those sorts of experiences. How do you translate those into the work that you're doing today?
We still operate, the foundation we operate still a bit like a business where we are measuring everything that we do. And that's how we engage with the nonprofits that we fund. And part of that had to do with the fact that I had spent, and Tom Parrish, the chief operating officer, as well as my father and my brother and other people that sit on the board, have spent the majority of their life in business. And that's just how we had operated. That's how our professional life had developed. When I joined the foundation, and we just put a little bit more rigor into the work we were doing, but it's not just let's measure for measuring's sake, but we provide consultative services for our nonprofits as well. If they need help or support in certain areas, we are absolutely there to help surround them and help make them introductions or make connections wherever we can to see them be successful. We are investing in leaders and we're investing in a mission, and that continues to be very important for our effort. That approach or that strategy is not different than it was in the business world. In the business world, at least for me, it was a lot about how do you get the right people around a table? How do you build that partnership or those partnerships so that you have a common mission, vision, you have a great trajectory and pathway to move forward? It's a very simple strategy to move over to the nonprofit space as well.
Yeah, I think that it's easy to excuse a mission-driven concept from the responsibility of also being results-oriented.
Mm-hmm.
That if you are showing up with this, I've got this great idea, I've got this, mission that's kind of deep into my heart that I want to do something, then some folks can say, okay, I can be less focused on the results because my mission is good, my mission is sound. How difficult or how easy was the transition for you and thinking about the foundation, going from a business background, moving into a place that had a very clear objective and a clear mission to do good things and drive outcomes for kids, but also hold it accountable for the results that it was achieving?
Moving from for-profit to nonprofit, at least for me, I actually hired a coach to say, help me think through this, because I have a for-profit mindset of making money and saving money and reinvesting that money. Moving from that to a mission that's more focused on the social side, it was just a different mindset. And so I really hired someone to help me through that, knowing that it could be a challenge for me. In going down that pathway, I found there's a lot of easy things to connect between the for-profit and the nonprofit. And finding those pathways is really where I was able to help continue to grow. Within the foundation, the work that we continue to push forward when it comes to thinking about things from a measurable outcome perspective, I mean, it comes back to, if the mission ultimately is to help students be successful in life, and in order to do so these days, we really need students to be able to stepping into some sort of post-secondary credential. We've got to measure things along that pathway. And it became very natural in the way that we talked about things at the foundation and really moving forward with our mission to say, let's use the data to set strategies and use those strategies to inform our funding approach. I would hope that anyone in the nonprofit space would be following the same sort of approach, which is it's a business mindset.
It doesn't diminish the value of the thing you're trying to accomplish by approaching it as what's working and what's having an impact.
I think it validates it.
The Scarlett Family Foundation has been deeply focused on early literacy, college readiness, and educator quality. Why did those become your top priorities?
Well, originally, those were not our top priorities.
Okay.
Originally, we wanted to give away a scholarship to students that wanted to study business in school.
Super niche.
I mean, yes. You would think that most people would understand what business meant when it comes to degrees. Unfortunately, we found that two things. One, not a lot of kids understood the concept of business credentials or business degrees, which was a little bit shocking to us. And the second thing is we recognized that kids weren't ready. So when students were filling out very simple questions about, an essay question for our scholarship, for example, what do you want to do after you graduate from high school or after you graduate from college or university, the responses were almost incomprehensible. And that gave us pause. So we took a step back and said, well, what more can we be doing to help kids become college and career ready, knowing that we'd like to give away scholarships. Not everyone wants to go to college or university, which I totally respect that. But we want to be able to help people thrive after high school. And so we expanded our scholarship program to include STEM majors. And suddenly the scholarship applications went through the roof, which is fantastic. And the second thing was that's when we started funding nonprofits. And we started very early on with funding the people that we knew, because it was a new process for us. And then as we started understanding a lot more about a very multidimensional ecosystem, that being the K-12 system and even post-secondary, we recognize there's certain levers that make sense for us that we believe can be really important in a student's life or life cycle. One of them being literacy. English language arts literacy is really important at a very, very early age. I would also say math is equally as important. We have not leaned into that a lot yet as a state or even as a philanthropist yet, but we still believe that's a really important piece. College and career advising is a very important piece along that path, because we found a lot of students, similar to my experience with Destiny and her counselor, they're overwhelmed or they're focused on other things. They're not able to have those individualized conversations with students to say, hey, where do you want to go, Adam? What makes sense for you? What's good for your family? What are your aspirations and your career goals? Maybe that is a 2-year. Maybe that's a technical school. Maybe it's a 4-year school. Maybe it's military. You don't know unless you're having those one-on-one conversations. And then we also, this seems to prove itself out time and time again, is leadership matters. So whether you are leading a nonprofit, whether you're leading a classroom, whether you're leading a school, whether you're leading an entire district, that's really matters. And so we spend a lot of time focused on the leadership piece and supporting talent strategies.
You have written pretty candidly about the disconnect between high school diplomas and true post-secondary readiness. And you've talked a little bit about it today here, and have emphasized also the importance of data in some of these decisions. I'm curious to know, what does the data tell us about those two things, and how should philanthropic organizations and nonprofit entities respond to those gaps?
It's really challenging for me to look at some of the data that comes out in Tennessee and in other states too. When you look at so many kids coming in very early, they might not be prepared. They're so eager. They're so excited. That kids are like little sponges. As you know, you've got young children as I do. Like, they are sponges at a very early age. And then you have middle school, which one of my children is in middle school. That's a whole different dimension. Things begin to shift. And then in high school, if students don't have the academic rigor already in place, it's hard for them to continue beyond thinking what they're trying to get through on a daily basis. That being said, there's too many of our students that are not considered college ready. So they're not making a 21 on the ACT, which, put standardized tests aside, there is a marker there. And then there's also other elements where they don't have a person there helping guide them to what is next. So if we've got too many kids that are not ready, we have to think about alternative ways to still be able to help them think about life after high school. I believe one of the purposes of K-12 education is to help students become ready, have the basic knowledge, start exploring opportunities, see what's out there, and then be able to step into potential pathways, potential career pathways. So whether you want to be a pediatrician like Destiny at one point wanted to be, or a math teacher, or if you want to be an engineer of some sort, or if you want to be a cook, like whatever that might be, helping you go down those pathways and step into the right credentialing experiences, that is really important. I think we're seeing a lot of points where kids just drop off.
You've said before that these are all of our children. And as the Scarlett Foundation has shifted its work from focusing on specifically a scholarship for one student for one purpose to thinking about ways to build greater access and success for post-secondary, why do you think that mindset is critical broadly to changing the way that people think about improving public education and access to college?
Because it's the community that we live in. You know, we're living in a moment in time, but we have to think for these students going through education, these students are our future. This is, if we look across Nashville or any part of Tennessee, the students are going through K-12 will help run and lead our society. If we're not in a position where they're able to think for themselves, critically think for themselves, for our community, for our surroundings, I think we'll end up not being in a good place. And so being able to help them with their own mobility, their own opportunities is just important for all of us. And I think it's also very easy for each one of us to live in our own bubble and think just what's inside of our own bubble. But in reality, it's not just what's happening in my household or your household, it's what's happening across the broader community.
You have talked a lot about applying a business mindset to nonprofit and philanthropic work. And oftentimes my experience as a consultant to nonprofit organizations, that can sometimes feel like an unwelcomed aggression or a 4-letter word when you ask nonprofit organizations to think a little bit more strategic. One of the most powerful things I think you've said before is that listening, I'm going to quote directly here, that listening, truly listening, is often the most strategic move a leader can make. Can you say more about that and the impact that it has on work that nonprofit organizations may be driving?
I think that sometimes leaders get into what's considered tunnel vision. They're focused on this one small thing at the very end of a tunnel, and they don't stop to say, what are the other inputs? Or ask the questions for the people they've hired to be around them, to be the leadership team, to get their inputs. And if leaders are not listening to what's going on around them, or the people that are sitting at the table, they're only really getting one voice in a strategy. They're not really getting a holistic view of what could be, or thinking about the pros or the cons or the risks. That is listening. I'm sure you've heard the old adage, you've got 2 ears for a reason, right? Use them. And it's just really important, especially in today's day and age.
Yeah, I'll think about it from a fundraising context as well, that if you want advice, ask for money. If you want money, ask for advice. I had a person that gave to the organization that I previously ran, who I asked for 3 years in a row. And for 3 years in a row, this person said no to me pretty quickly, pretty unceremoniously. And this was a pattern, not just with this particular donor, but with others. And spent some time trying to think about, how do we change the trajectory of some of these asks? And one of the kind of less than brilliant ideas, or that should have been self-evident, was maybe we ask better questions to understand the true barriers and motivations for this prospect, their timeline, what matters to them, and then better frame our work within their theory of change. And when we did that with this particular person, I was on a phone call with them, and they said, basically, Adam, we've been at this work for 10 years and we're no further along than we were 10 years ago. We should be further along. I said, respectfully, we're in the second year of the Adams administration, if you think about it as the United States, and walked them through the progress we've made, but then also strategically where we want to go. But that was a really good indication for me that this person prioritized expediency because it was directly linked to the impacts for students in real world context. When we were able to help them see the work that we were doing, I literally got a call in less than 24 hours from that person committing a 5-figure contribution to our organization after having said no to me 3 times for 3 years in a row. Our work hadn't fundamentally changed, but what changed was the way that we approached that prospect and listened to them and helped them see a pathway into our work a little bit differently. You have led efforts that convene nonprofits and businesses and policymakers across the board. What did it take for you to build and sustain that meaningful cross-sector collaboration, particularly when folks are often speaking different dialects or even different languages around a particular issue?
It's always started with the data in those conversations. What is the problem? And is the problem something that we think is important to fix? How can we resolve that? And so that eye-opening moment when you realize the data is just not where it needs to be or is doing fantastic, then it's a matter of understanding and stepping into the relationships that you already have built and having a lot of one-on-one conversations to see who else is at the same table with you. Do they have the same mindset? That's where, and let me back up. It's not just having the same mindset, but having a belief that you can actually make a change on whatever that data point is or whatever the problem has been identified. And then bringing people to the table and listening to their point conversation earlier is listening to what everyone has to say and coming up with ideas and strategies where everyone can have an opportunity to fit in. There's also times where you have to have difficult conversations. There's also times where I've had to have conversations with certain leaders about how can we be more accepting to those at the table? How can we express differences in different ways so that we might not all agree, but at least we can have a good conversation and learn from each other so that we can come up with a better plan.
Yeah, I think I'm going to put you on the spot on this one because it's a question that I'm going to ask that I know a lot of listeners that may be running nonprofits or initiatives would love to know the answer to. And to be perfectly candid, if you can help solve this problem for me today, I'd be grateful. You've got a clear direction on where you want to go, and you've got a clear strategy and a goal and a place where you want to land. How do you make space for others, as you alluded to a second ago, who may have different ideas and different designs on the ownership of the outcome of that work, who need to work in collaboration with other partners that may be driving toward similarly aligned, but not necessarily the same goal, in order to be respectful of your mission and honor the things that you want to accomplish, while also recognizing that you don't have a market on either the vision, the strategy, or the tactic?
It's an interesting question.
You're going to solve the existential problem for lots of nonprofits if you can nail this one for us. And if not, we're underscoring that this is not an easy task.
It's not an
for
easy
a lot of
task.
organizations.
Yeah, you're spot on. I think if you, based on the example you're just providing, agreement to where the destination is really important starting point. If you know that if you and all of your friends are going to try to plan a trip, we need to first decide whether you're going to the mountains or the beach or the lake or wherever your destination is. If everyone's going to a different destination, you're not going to get everyone on the same page. And so you kind of hold up your hands and say, let's, maybe next time makes most sense. Those people that all want to go to the beach, let's talk about what that direction is and how do you move forward. If you've got someone at the table that doesn't have the same vision, it doesn't have to be the exact same vision, but if in that example, if you have someone at the table who does not see the opportunity that you see as the business leader, then maybe they not need to be at your table. And that's a really hard position to be in. Now, there's also opportunities that whoever's leading the table to have a sit down with that partner and find out where are their opportunities. How can you have a cross section of conversations where we're maybe thinking about things different? Maybe we're not talking the same language. Are there ways for us to translate communications in different ways? Because you might be able to find that you are wanting to go the same direction, but you just haven't been able to have the right conversations yet.
Yeah.
And I so much of that to me goes back to relationships. You know, whether you're needing to ask someone to leave the table or whether you're saying, let's stay at the table and have further conversations, can we find the connections for the outcome?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I'll stick with your beach versus lake versus mountains metaphor. The question that always comes up in my mind, even if you've got two people that say they want to go to the beach, I immediately want to know, well, why? What's the value behind going to the beach? Do we like the sensation of the sand in our toes? Do we like the smell of the air? Do we like the sound of the ocean? Do we like the feel of the water? Can we get aligned around some of the other whys about why we might want to go to the beach? Because that's going to give me clues as and strategies on how to utilize each of those different folks. I'd love to know, kind of sticking with this strategy and the kind of the challenges of leadership, and as you've made the transition out of the for-profit space into the nonprofit space, what was an assumption that you had going into philanthropic and foundation work, or something that you knew that, like, deep in your gut, that you had to unlearn in this new phase of your life?
Initially, I thought it was going to be a lot about the money. Because in the for-profit space, you work at Coca-Cola, you are looking at the money that we are bringing in. Or when I was working at Mars, or any of the for-profit spaces that I worked on. In nonprofit, in our world, it's about the students. And that translation in the end was very, very easy. It is, how do we help student outcomes? How do we help students be successful? But instead of it being money, it's lives. And I think that's the biggest difference in for-profit versus nonprofit. I shouldn't say that because there's a lot of for-profit that's also focused on lives, but not the areas that I worked with.
You are unique as a guest for many of our listeners who have find yourself in a position as both a foundation and a nonprofit and a granting entity. But you've also been on boards and parts of organizations that have raised money for folks. I think the challenge and the question that I seem to get most from the clients that I work with is, how do we engage with donors and identify people that might be in our space? So without giving away your private cell phone number for folks that care about these issues, can you help us think about some kind of high level ways of thinking or broader strategies that might help folks in a variety of different community-based groups think about how to approach a foundation or a donor in a way that feels authentic and not transactional? Because realistically, a foundation knows why a nonprofit executive is calling most of the time. How do you make sure that that relationship feels real and authentic and not just a person on my call sheet?
The number one way to do that is through building relationships in a long term. And I think we're very lucky in Tennessee is that we're a very relational state and we can have those conversations, but it is a lot about just being able to sit down and meet people and find the common pathways. I'm gonna pull a string real quick across some of the conversations that we've been having. You talked about using data. You talked a second ago about strategy and timelines. Like, all of those things from our perspective are important. If you have a common issue or common mission, which in our case is education, we're looking at data, we're looking at timeliness, we're looking at action, we're looking at results. But the number one thing we're looking for is we're looking for great leaders, because it really, really does matter. And all of those pieces, all of those elements, the timing and the results and everything else come into play typically when you have a really good leader. The example you were giving earlier, when you went back and talked with that one particular funder 2 years later under the Adams administration, I don't know who this person is, but you've now laid out, like, this is what the data has said. This is the direction we're going. You set a vision. That sort of approach for us works really well. I will say, once you've met one foundation, you've met one foundation. We all operate very differently. And so I wish there was like a one specific pathway, but there's really not. And a lot of it is, it's just, I would say, really mostly based on relationships.
Yeah, I think if you've met one foundation, you've met one foundation. Like I felt my entire body quiver when you said that, because I'm remembering all of the different personalities of the folks that were engaged with the organizations that I've been involved with or that I've helped to lead. And it's true that, our children have very different personalities. Our neighbors have very different personalities. Why should we expect our financial partners and the foundations that we work with to be so homogeneous that we can just write one email and that satisfy all of the needs for all of them? And to the extent that we're doing that, we're being pretty lazy about how we approach and frame our work. And I would argue that the folks that are taking that approach are probably feeling a heightened sense of pressure and stress around their fundraising relationships versus those that are approaching the foundations and the partners that they have as individuals and being really clear about the things that align with them and then their work.
And I think it's a bit of a challenge on the fundraising side is that you do have some foundations will have very specific areas of focus, but some foundations don't. Some foundations are really, what was the donor's intent and what were their interests are, what their interests were or are. When you're dealing with individual philanthropists, it's the same sort of thing. Each donor might have a different heartfelt desire to lean in on an issue. And when the moment arises, it comes down to data is one. I also did not mention this earlier. I think it's really important. Is storytelling is another big one. Because if you're really going to pull at the heartstrings of anyone that might consider donating, it's going to be coming from either the stories, the heartfelt stories, or it's going to come from data, or it's going to come from both.
Yeah, I think the point that I think leaders need to hear frequently is the personal relationship, connecting it to the vision and the data is so critically important. And you can slot in fundraising to friend-raising to strategy or vision. They don't have a market on any of these. It's not like it's unique to fundraising, all of the things that you've talked about. You have surely experienced, either professionally or personally, a moment that didn't go as planned, but taught you something essential about leadership. I'm curious if you could help me kind of understand what lessons you might have had in those moments that didn't go well, and how did you use that to strengthen your work or to sharpen your focus, and the impact that it had on the work that you were doing?
Adam, there's so many things that have not gone well throughout my career, but what's really important is to be able to learn from those lessons. And so they could be really small ones, they can be really big ones. Not moving away from your values, your ethical side, your moral side, like those are leading with integrity. These are all really important pieces. If you're ever asked to put those out of the way, that's a big red flag. It's time to walk away. But the times when growth for me has happened, it's been where I have failed forward or been given the opportunity to fail forward, or had a very hard situation. Sometimes it's just Tara putting her foot in her mouth. And I'll give you one. This is a kind of a small example, but sitting around a room with nonprofits, this is where I learned foundations probably should not be in some of these rooms. And everyone was talking about time and money. And I made the suggestion, well, what sort of resources do we have at the table? And resources are defined differently by different people, and words matter. I thought it was very innocent for me to say resources. Immediately, one woman's like, well, we don't all have money, Tara. That is correct. I was thinking more on the time side, but it was, one of those moments where I realized words do matter. I don't always say the right thing, but I certainly live with a heartfelt intention. So I certainly followed up with that person afterwards and explained my position.
Yeah, I can. It's a good reminder that that person's comment to you probably was informed by lots of other things as well.
Yeah,
and doesn't necessarily make it any sharper in terms of how it landed. We've talked a lot about the foundation that you lead and some of the evolution from starting thinking about scholarships for business majors into work around access and college readiness. What's next for the foundation, and what are you most excited about as you think about the next few years and the work that the Scarlett Foundation is leading?
We continue to lean in very strongly with college access and completion. And while we have our scholarship program, we are expanding our scholarship program some, and we're going to be providing a lot more intentional community-based support for college and career access post-high school. That the work is happening both in the rural communities and also in the urban communities, and that's really exciting. Knowing that Georgetown University came out recently and said about 85% of our jobs in Tennessee require some sort of post-secondary credential, whether that's a 2-year technical or a 4-year degree. We need our students to see that opportunity, to be inspired by what's next. We need employers to step at the table and be able to help with apprenticeships and inspiring these students. We need the military to step in too and be able to help inspire these kids. That, to me, seeing communities grow and evolve holistically, that to me is super exciting.
That's awesome. I think a lot about, we've talked about our children here, and if no one else listens to this podcast, I know my 2 kids will. And when I was preparing for this interview, I was sitting at home at my desk, and I was reading through some of the questions that I was going to ask you. And both of my kiddos got up from what they were doing and walked toward the door of the office, I think a little confused, because they were trying to figure out, was I recording this episode with Tara right now? And what was going on? And it's a good reminder to me that they are always around and they are always watching and they are always observing. But it was also a reminder for why the things that we do matter. And in the work that I did previously, I had a direct connection to it because my kids were in school. We were advocating for public education policies. But now the organizations that I get to support are having positive impacts in communities all over the place. I'm curious for you if you could blend those two. We spend a lot of time when I'm talking with you socially about our kids and the things that they're doing. Think about, for me, and what is a moment that has reminded you recently why the work you do matters, and what's a lesson in that you would love your children to reflect both now and into the future?
The moments that we receive thank you cards from our scholars are probably the moments that really stand out the most to not only myself and our team, but also to the board. Because we recognize we've affected not just one student, but in some cases their whole family. That's inspiring for us. It's what keeps us going. We get to do this for kids every single day. And in bringing my children along that journey, helping them understand the very basics of not everyone is in an equal place. And being able to help them understand that the world is very diverse. We've got a lot of opportunity, and we can help support each other as a community. So we spend intentional time going and doing volunteer efforts so that they can see what does it mean to give back in that way. And I don't know that all families are in a position to do that, but it's certainly an important piece for us to help our kids recognize that giving back is just as important as anything else in life.
That's great. Tara, thank you for joining me today and for sharing your story with such clarity and purpose. Tara's leadership reminds us that change isn't about programs or policies. It's about people showing up, doing the work, and refusing to accept that the system is just the way that it is. From mentorship to mothering to mobilizing resources, Tara's shown that lasting change begins when we lead with care, courage, and conviction. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and a review. That 5-star really does matter, and share it with someone you think would find it valuable. To learn more about the work of the Scarlett Family Foundation, visit scarlettfoundation.org. Thanks again for listening to Catalysts for Change, brought to you in part by the Southern Research Collaborative. I'm Adam Lister, and I'll see you next time.